Islam to Sunni Orthodox Islam, but he also shepherded the community through its growth and development and introduced several principles of Islamic, American Islamic foundational development that would shape and mold our community as American Muslims up until this day. So there are a few things that Imam W.D. Mohammed, rahimahullah ta'ala, was known for in terms of his leadership. Number one, education. Education was a very, very important priority in the thinking, in the teaching, in the lecturing of Imam W.D. Muhammad. I recall a conversation that I was fortunate enough, alhamdulillah, to have with him 2 years before he passed. A conversation we had when I was in Istanbul, Turkey. And for the hour that we had a conversation, the entire topic was education, the importance of education, and the importance of American Muslims, and specifically African American Muslims, being educated in the principles and the furu' and the details of the religion of Islam, because it was extremely important for the American Muslim community to have ambassadors, representatives at the local level and at the national level that could speak eloquently about Islam and that could formulate new ideas about how to bring Islam into, or the practice of Islam, into the American context in a way that allowed it to be seen as a normative part of the American fabric, and not something that's that's alien to the American experience. So education was very important. Education through the legacy of the Claire Muhammad schools, for example, was part of the project of Imam W.D. Muhammad. There's another thing that he left us with, which we take for granted today, but in his time in the 70s and the 80s was definitely pioneering, and he laid the foundation for this development, and arguably he was the very first American Muslim to speak about this issue and to really propagate it and to support it and to put it on a playing field at the communal level that it will be recognized. Actually, two things. The first is the notion of interfaith work. Today we take it for granted that interfaith work is a good thing and a positive thing. But back during the time where Imam W.D. Muhammad was leading the community and to new horizons and its new practices in its newfound faith, it was not a common thing in the late 70s and certainly not in the 80s for Muslims in the United States to be accepting of interfaith work. And so Imam W.D. Muhammad spoke of the benefits of interfaith work, the importance of interfaith work. And he himself was a pioneer in working with various interfaith organizations, not only locally or nationally in the United States, but internationally as well. And this is how he put Islam on the platform in the interfaith space in a way that no other Muslim leader globally, you could definitely argue globally and certainly nationally, had done. And so interfaith participation was critical for the work and the legacy of Imam W.D. Muhammad. All of the interfaith alliances that American masajids have today were pioneered by the work of Imam W.D. Muhammad in the late 70s and early 80s. And he was criticized for this work by many Muslim organizations as well back in that time period. He was criticized for working with Christians and Jews and called a sellout, etc. But he stood his ground, and he understood what the future of Muslims in this country was going to be, that the future of Islam in this country was directly and intrinsically tied to the future of religion at large in this country, and specifically the Abrahamic faiths, the unity of Christianity and Judaism and Islam together as brothers and sisters working toward ismat ad-din, the sacredness and the sanctity of religion in this country, in a climate that is rife with secularism. And so while working in the interfaith arena, Imam W.D. Muhammad also worked specifically for da'wah within this arena, not just as an interfaith partner, but he led an initiative to engage in constructive dialogue with churches, specifically in the southern parts of the United States and the eastern parts of the U.S., against iconography. In other words, against the representation and the depiction and the paintings of Prophet Isa, Prophet Jesus, alayhi salam. So Imam W.D. Muhammad worked tirelessly to understand the representation and the drawing and the paintings and the portrayal, the tasweer of Sayyidina Isa, alayhi salam, our Prophet Jesus, alayhi salam, was a desecration, was not something that is representative of honoring Prophet Isa, alayhi salam. And his advocacy on this issue caused many churches in the southeast and some in the Atlanta area actually to take they actually took their pictures or their paintings off the walls in the churches. Some churches got rid, subhanAllah, from his effort. Some churches got rid of their paintings and their drawings and their sculptures of Jesus, alayhi salam. They actually saw the wisdom in not depicting that. And so what's very interesting is, in a climate where globally there's been this Muslim reaction to the Danish so-called cartoons that have been depicting the Prophet ﷺ in a negative light. Imam W.D. Muhammad was dealing with the depiction of Prophet Jesus ﷺ in the churches. And this caused a unique response from many Christian churches. And that's because he used to articulate that the point is that Muslims hold Jesus ﷺ in deep, deep reverence and esteem and love. And whatever mode that Jesus ﷺ is drawn or depicted does not do justice. And is actually a devaluation, a denigration of Isa ﷺ. And because of our love for Sayyidina Isa ﷺ, so we do not like to see our loved ones, demoralized, degraded, disrespected. And so this push by the community and by Imam W.D. Muhammad in the African American community, this push to work in interfaith circles, with interfaith circles, for larger issues related to poverty and hunger and human rights, this push for solidarity with our Christian and Jewish brothers in the American context was strategic not only for our larger goals as people of faith, as children of the Abrahamic tradition, but it was also important in being able to engage in dialogue with our Christian brothers and sisters about the seriousness behind the gravity of their depiction of Isa alayhi salam. And so it worked for a very long time and with many different churches. And he established relationships with the Catholic Church, with Protestant churches, with different Jewish groups. And these alliances went a long way in promoting the well-being and the positive representation of Islam in America as an American religion, not as a foreign input, not as an alien religion. And this did marvelous effort. It was a marvelous effort that yielded a lot of fruits and benefits. One for the African American Muslim community, but two for the larger American Muslim community that opened a lot of doors as well. So this is the second thing that Imam W.D. Muhammad left for us and left a legacy for, that we are still reaping the benefits of right now. The third thing is based on his speech that he gave in the city of Atlanta, in Atlanta, Georgia, I believe in the year 1977. And this was his historic Atlanta speech. And in this speech, he did something also very unique that we have not heard since this time period. And that was, he articulated a vision for Muslims that was based on what he called healthy American patriotism. Healthy American patriotism. And he mentioned that as imams, as communal leaders, as American Muslims, and especially as African American Muslims, we needed to develop and cultivate not American patriotism, but healthy American patriotism. It means to love your beled, to love your homeland, to love the land that you were born in, that you were educated in, that you pay taxes to love the land, but to also be willing to critique the wrongs that you see. That's the healthy part. Much like you love your child, but if your child does something wrong, you're going to tell your child this is wrong. And it's because of the love that you have for that child that you're able to tell them that this is wrong, and you're able to try to guide them. And that's a healthy love. If your child did something wrong and you support them in their doing something wrong, that's love, but that's not healthy. So he spoke about Muslims and American Muslims having healthy American patriotism. So he encouraged, Muslims. This opened the doors, for example, for a lot of African American Muslims to number one, join local law enforcement, to become police officers, to work as firemen and firewomen, to work in the armed forces, to run for local office and become elected officials. We take these things for granted today, but you have to remember 30, 40 years ago, this was unheard of in the United States of America. And to run for local office or to become a police officer, you were deemed like a sellout. You were deemed as, working for the kuffar, and all of this rhetoric and language from the perspective that was coming from overseas that didn't understand the plights of American Muslims. Imam W.D. Mohammed silenced all that and said, no, you live here, you work here, that you pay taxes in your country. You can't go anywhere else. And so as African Americans, you're invested in this land, and they not only this land owe you, but you owe them. You've got to show them how to be good. That means you've got to be involved in the American project, which is an ongoing project, because there is no there's no land on the planet which has a perfect system for Muslims to live in, even and partly many Muslim countries. And so we've got to make this place better. And this place is only made better through our participation in the governance of this place, in the laws of this place, in the well-being of this place, in the civic activities of this place, in the social fabric of this place. We've got to have Muslims on the school board, Muslims on the city council, Muslims as part of the community members. People have to see and feel and know Muslims, and it has to be a normal part of their everyday experience. And most importantly, Muslims have to be willing to show the flag, to show support for the flag, to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, all of these national symbols of honoring the country and showing respect to the land that you were born in, this patriotism, all of and so it didn't become very popular amongst masajids that were majority African American until after 9/11, right? When 9/11 happened, that's when all the masajid across the United States started showing the American flag and putting it out there for support. 25 years before that, Imam W.D. Mohammed was saying, you have got to demonstrate healthy American patriotism. The good things about this country you have to support. The bad things about this country you have to speak out against, but don't just speak out against it. Go to your local officials, be involved in your communities and your local governance and the mayor's office and city councils, and change those things that are wrong. Don't just sit back and criticize them. Do something about it. Be a part of the solution. Don't just sit back and critique the problem. And in this way, he laid a foundation for the next generation to come up in a climate, in a masjid environment, in a communal environment, where Muslims were patriotic about where they lived in a healthy sense, not in a non-healthy sense. And so you had an entire generation of young Americans who were born and brought up in this mindset. I personally was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, in that community where these influences were taught to us. My father, rahimahullah, ran for local office in the city of Atlanta and Stone Mountain. Muslims who ran for city office at the local level, who involved in national politics as well. And so from the 80s into the 90s, you had the beginnings of African American Muslims becoming not only prison chaplains, but being chaplains in law enforcement, going to Congress, and being elected into local office, becoming police officers, becoming judges, going to law school, going into different fields, becoming part and parcel of the American fabric, and no longer thinking about being a separate community, no longer thinking about establishing sort of an Islamic community that was separate from the larger American society. This separatist mentality that used to exist early on was eradicated with the teachings of Imam W.D. Mohammed, rahmatullahi alayhi. And then that's the third component. And finally, his last legacy that he left, specifically in the African American community, closer to the time that he died, was the idea of the importance of talib al-ilm, of rihla for ilm. And this left its mark on myself and many others, where he opened the doors for African American Muslims in his community to go study Islam, for example, in Syria, in Damascus, and in Yemen. This was back in the late 90s, right? So there were people who went to Damascus with me in 1998, for example, and he opened up doors for students to study on full scholarships. So these were, we studied Arabic language, and we studied Sharia and Aqidah and Tazkiyah, and all the different sciences of the usul and the furu and the Arabic language. That had to become the new area of African American Muslim engagement. And so you no longer had a community that was thinking about self-improvement. And early on in the Nation of Islam, the idea of black improvement and self-improvement was based on the fact that taking people that had been in prison or had been poor and lifting them up, giving them a sense of identity, a sense of self, taking them off of those who were on drugs, taking them off of drugs, taking them off of alcohol, taking them off of pork. Islam was used as a mechanism from the Nation of Islam to build people up and to teach them a different sense of who they were, because black people were taught, African Americans were taught they were nothing in this country. And so Islam, through the work of the nation, taught them they were something for the first time ever. And then it was Malcolm that helped them understand this. So this sense of self-development, self-improvement used to be based in reforming what black and African American meant. It no longer meant a slave. It no longer meant a Negro. It meant somebody who was educated, who had self-respect, who could take care of their family, who knew that they were beautiful, etc. Right, but was still fighting injustice. Imam W.D. Mohammed rahimahullah, through his initiative of the Rihla and supporting tulab of ilm, seeking knowledge in the deen, he gave African Americans a new sense of self-improvement. No longer were you concerned about improving yourself through hard work, through staying off drugs and alcohol and not dating and not smoking and things like you. Now your self-improvement was based on iman and akhlaq and ilm, right? That was your self-improvement, how strong you work for the akhirah. And so you have an entire generation of African Americans coming up, understanding through travel that their akhirah was more important than their dunya. That particularly they studied fiqh, they studied law to understand what the law was. Because early on in the United States, there was a confusion with so many Muslims from different countries. Different practices of Islam were in different places. And there was so much intermingling with culture. So there was cultural Islam. And you didn't know what when somebody prayed or when somebody got married or when they did this or that, which part was the Islamic part and which part was the cultural part. And if it was cultural, then why do we have to do it based on this culture? Why not that culture? It was so confusing for African Americans. So one of the reasons was to go over and learn what the deen was, right? When you learn what the deen is, then you understand that, okay, this is deen and this is culture. This is what's based on the nas. This is what's based on the adat and the taqalid, the culture and the norms, right? This is very important. And so people, traveled to Damascus, studied in Damascus until it was unstable. Then they went to Yemen, and studied in Yemen and Hadramaut. And then there were other doors that were opened up. I went to Istanbul. Some other folks went to West Africa. Some folks went to Morocco. Some folks went to Mosul and Egypt. So many other places that were focused on training specifically African Americans, in the ulum of the deen and the usul of the deen in all of its aspects. And more importantly, that taught a civilizational perspective of Islam, not just a book perspective, but a civilization, something based on the Torah. So we understood what khat was, calligraphy, and its importance in the Islamic tapestry, what awqaf were, and how they formed Islamic societies and cities, and how courts were run, and how problems were solved through sulh, for example, and how the law was used differently in society versus what we're reading in the books, and how all of that changed through modernity, and what colonialism did to the Muslim world and Muslim mentality, and how that also affected the legacy of Africans who were brought as slaves to the United States. And so it reformed sense of self and let us know, okay, if we're going to be successful in this country, we can't put being American first. We've got to put being Muslim first. So therefore, we can't be American Muslims in that sense, where America is a priority and Muslim is second. We've got to be Muslim Americans in the sense that we've got to know ourselves first and understand who we are and our priorities. And then after that, or through that, because as a manifestation from that, be involved in American politics and American engagement and American communal development. We're not here to become just healthy patriots that are based in liberty and justice for all, but we don't pray, or liberty and justice for all, but we have no idea what our turath is and what our books say and how to practice it. No. This is jahl. We're not going to be Muslims in name only, Mohammed and Khadija, and we call ourselves come into the world Mohammed, but then you get to know us as Mo, or we come in as Ali and then you call us Al. No, we're not doing that. We're going to be Muslim, and we're going to take this seriously, and it's Muslim for life. That's what came from the legacy of Imam W.D. Muhammad. So the yaqeen that Malcolm had about this deen and about his mission came, interestingly enough, through the work of Imam W.D. Muhammad, who taught about healthy American patriotism first to the community, and then at the end, the importance of da'wah and khidmah through ilm and through reforming of the self, and then through the books and the turath of our deen and of our affiliation to our legacies. And literacy in our turath became almost more important for many African American communities than literacy in the Quran, which is very interesting, right? So because you had to go to the Quran, but from the other sources, right, so that you could understand the Quran. So this is the teaching of Imam W.D. Muhammad. He wanted us to understand who we were, both in the local sense, American, and in the textual sense as Muslims, right? We are Muslims from a text, from the Quran, from a nas, but also we live in a context. And so understanding the importance of those two and to revive our identities, that's the legacy of our great Imam W.D. Muhammad, rahmatullah alayh, whose work is not replicated enough in the larger American tapestry, but whose work we are into, we greatly benefited from, and we hope that his memory and his teachings become a source of inspiration for all of us in times of need and darkness. So inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the proper healthy reverence for our leaders, for our country, certainly for our teachers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept their khair, their good deeds, and forgive them for their shortcomings. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us healthy agents in the work of uplifting our country in acts of khair where it's pleasing to Allah ta'ala, and healthy advisors to our country when they're doing acts of shar and dalal, so that they reform, or at least we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having done our part. So inshallah ta'ala, may Allah bless you all and your families. Have a good evening, and next week inshallah ta'ala we will continue and we will speak about the legacy of another one of our great leaders and great Imam, inshallah ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.